to share a few thoughts that tie into this. If you turn the clock back to 1945, the war is over. The Jewish people, a third of the Jewish people is wiped out. All the Torah centers are destroyed. All European culture is destroyed. It's clear that nobody could have imagined at the time the Jewish world's going to look like 60, 70 years later. We look around today and we take it for granted. And if we put ourselves back in 1945, we have to say, what were Jews thinking? And many of the Jews were thinking, I'm throwing in the towel. But we want to go even further back and listen to these stories that were just told. And again, the survival of David and his family. What motivates, what enables somebody to survive that? So, Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning talked about, he was a Holocaust survivor in the concentration camp. And he came to the realization that the ones who survived had something to live for. And it's pretty clear to me that when you listen to all of these stories and knowing the story of David, Zichrono Livracha, and Yibadal L'chaim, she should be well, Fela, this is what had to be in their minds, and it's exactly this week's parsha, the culmination of the Jewish exile in Egypt, which is going to happen this Shabbos, Parshas Yitro Matan Torah, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, when he's talking to Moshe, and he's telling them, okay, I'm going to take the Jewish people out of Egypt. Vayomer ki eyeh imcha v'zeh lecha ha'ot, ki anochi shlachticha. The sign that I sent you, v'hotziacha et ha'am b'Mitzrayim, ta'avdun et ha'elokim al ha'har hazeh. God is telling Moshe, look to the future. There's a purpose. You're in exile, but you're heading to Har Sinai. And when Yaakov, we'll work backwards, when Yaakov is going down to Egypt, when he finds out that Yosef is alive, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Almighty, appears to him, and he says, Anochi hakel Elokei avicha, al tira merda Mitzrayim, don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. Anochi ered imach Mitzrayim, I will go down, I will accompany you. Imo anochi b'tzara, our sources tell us, whenever we go into exile, God is there with us, Kivyochol, suffering along with us. Va'anochi alcha gam alon. But God promises Yaakov, I'm going to take you back. You're going to head back. You're going to be in deep exile, but you should know there's a future. And that already goes back to Brit Bein HaBetarim, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes the original covenant with Avraham Avinu. So he says to him, Yadoa teda kigeria zaracha be'eretz lo lahem. Your children, your descendants are going to be in a land that's not theirs, strangers. Va'avadum v'inu otam, and they will be tortured. V'gam et hagoy asher yavodu dan anochi, I will judge the nation that judges them. V'acharei chen yetzu b'chush gadol, they will leave with great accomplishments, with great assets. V'atat tavo el vatecha b'shalom, v'dor revi'i yashuvu heina. The promise that ultimately the Jews are coming back, the descendants of Abraham will come back to Eretz Yisrael. Judaism is built on uniting three time frames. The three time frames are the past, the present, and the future. Without that, we have nothing. If we only live for the present, we're not connected to the past. We don't know where we came from, and we don't know where we're heading. The present is meaningless. There's no question that when David Zichrono Livracha was going through what he went through, running away from Sosnovich, going to a labor camp, joining the army, fighting. And one of the stories that the family told me is that in the Russian army, he went through and passed through the Warsaw Ghetto and found a siddur. Found 2 books that were left, and he picked up the siddur and kept it. It's still in the family. He was looking always, there is a future. We have something that we must fight for, the Jewish people, the future of the Jewish people. And that's the only thing that could have kept them going. And it was exactly what happened. When you think about Holocaust survivors, so we like to talk about a miracle. It's miraculous, the endurance of those survivors. It's miraculous to see the blessings that the Almighty bestowed on so many of these survivors, that they left the Holocaust with nothing and rebuilt themselves, as the Shapell family did, building an empire. It's miraculous. But you know what's not miraculous? What's not miraculous is the fact that so many of them took the resources that they were blessed with and plowed it in to the Jewish future. To plow it in to knowing that we have to build the Jewish future. We cannot let the Nazis be victorious. And we look around at what the Jewish world is today, and of course, that's the proof of our eternity. We talk about the past, the future, as well as the present. So there were 3 main causes. We have to make them in broad strokes. So Mr. Shapell, Zichrono Livracha, was devoted to 3 causes. And the resources that he had were poured into those causes. The past was Holocaust education. I have here, amazingly, I located the obituary tribute in the Los Angeles Times after Mr. Shapell passed away. I'm going to read you 2 things from it. One is from one of his sons that told the newspaper why they were so devoted to Holocaust education, Holocaust museums. They were very involved in the Wiesenthal Center, in the Holocaust Memorial Museum, in Yad Vashem. So Rav Shapell, one of the sons, is quoted as saying, if you don't have evidence to support the memory changes over time. It withers slowly, and in the end, you've just got some sort of legend. What we heard tonight is not legend, it's fact, and it needs to be remembered because it shows what we went through as Jews and what we are today. And that's part of the miracle. It's part of the proof of the divinity of the Torah and the uniqueness of the Jewish people. That's the past. The present to David, Zichrono Livracha, was the state of Israel. A Holocaust survivor in 1945, 3 years later, there's a state of Israel with an army, with a culture, with an economy. And that's why he was very devoted to the state of Israel, especially to the IDF. And you can understand why his main focus was IDF. But what does it mean, the IDF? Making sure that the soldiers were comfortable. He gave money to build recreation centers for the soldiers in their off time, and making sure that in every recreation center, there was a Sefer Torah. That's the present. Very devoted to the state of Israel. And the future, Jewish education. That's the future of the Jewish people, was Jewish education, Jewish families, and you are all beneficiaries of that vision of the Shapell family. You're sitting here today because of their generosity. I'll just read you again another line from the obituary. Deeply religious, this is in the LA Times. He helped establish a school in Jerusalem called Yeshivat Darche Noam David Shapell College. The school, established in 1978, draws international students who do not necessarily come from strict religious backgrounds. Quote, many see it as an island of unity in an increasingly fractured Orthodox world, the Jerusalem Post said. Baruch Hashem, I think we have lived up to his value system, implementing it. But I want to close by telling you what this makes you responsible for. Because if people who went through what Holocaust survivors went through with nothing, and they had a focus on rebuilding the Jewish people, They could never dream of all the resources we have available. But the focus was Jewish education, the state of Israel, remembering what we went through, because if we don't remember the past, we're not connected to it. You have all the resources that they just dreamed about. And you have to not allow the comfort to distract you from the challenge, from the responsibility to implement that vision more and more. We have lots of challenges in the Jewish world today. I'm not going to go into them in public. There's a lot of challenges, a lot of things that are not the way they're supposed to be. And all of you sitting here is a proof to the eternity of the Torah, the fact that Jewish souls are always drawn back to the state of Israel and drawn back to the Torah. And you've got to make sure that that is perpetuated in your families, in your communities. And that's the best tribute and the best victory over the Nazis that we can continue to have as we honor the memory and hakarat hatov, the appreciation to Mr. Shapell, Zichrono Livracha, and his family.